No, we're breaking news here though. We're gonna switch into here briefly is the Ottawa Fury situation. If you don't know and you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube here, is that the Ottawa Fury, they did announce this past Friday that they unfortunately are going to be suspending operations for the 2020 just season in general. They're not, apparently they didn't get any sanctioning of any kind by CONCACAF or the CSA or the USSF to play in the USL for 2020. The letter, of course, from the ownership group there in Ottawa is stating that essentially the whole reason why they're suspending operations is really just politics, and they kind of go out and blame the CONCACAF, go out and blame the Canadian Soccer Association, as well as the U.S. Soccer Federation. They're all for not sanctioning them, and then, of course, the whole backstory is Ottawa Fury was in talks to possibly join the CPL for 2019. They didn't really want to take the jump from sure a bunch of different reasons, from financial to they wanted that stability. They just were in their new league in 2018, and then a year or two prior they're in the old NASL. Then they spent a year or two in the USL. They don't really want to jump again to the CPL, right, and possibly have that league full down the line. So I kind of see it from their point of view, but obviously in the past year now they've been kind of battling with trying to join the CPL. What say are you, Pat?
Man, there's a lot to unpack here, and I guess from my experience kind of in the business world, what gets released to the public in terms of the reasons and the explanation, not to say that anything that was released was false, so much as you can't help but wonder what else there is to the story. And in most stories, there are two sides of the story. In this case, there are likely to be 7 sides to the story, right? There's got to be more to it. And one of the interesting things that Kurt Larson put out there on Twitter recently was like, listen, this whole move to the Canadian Premier League, the fact that the league was getting up and going, was not a shock. This has been years in the making. And he made the argument that transition should have been in motion for years at this point, right? And that lack of sanctioning last year for Ottawa Fury should have been kind of that shot across the bow to say, listen, guys, this is real. So hard to make heads or tails of what really went on there, what kind of a role finance may have had in this decision. I have no appreciation for how viable an organization it was to begin with in its existing league, what their projections were for viability in this new league. Man, it's who knows? It's very hard to tell without having been a fly on the wall for those what I can only assume were very heated discussions.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if you were able to see it over the weekend, but I believe it was Friday night or early Saturday. Kurt Larson himself on Twitter came out and just was stating that, listen, Ottawa Fury they weren't even asked to pay an expansion fee. So if we didn't know for sure, it wasn't never confirmed by the CPL or Ottawa Fury if there was ever going to be an expansion fee. But then Kurt Larson himself came out on Twitter. Obviously, we all know Kurt Larson's a pretty reputable source at this point. And him coming out and just saying, listen, there was no transfer fee. They could have just for free moved from one league to the other league. And so with that all in mind, it's like almost like, why didn't they make the move? And of course, like I said, though, at the top of the show, is with the stability problem coming from a league like the USL. And before that, even 2 years prior to that, they were just wrapping up things in the NASL before that league went under, and then had to find a new home. Luckily, they found a new home. They were there for a year or two, and I don't think that they felt comfortable making that jump over the CPL. For me, though, it's just crazy that that they would go out of the way to almost suspend operations when they could have just came over the CPL for free. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like it was just a real extreme. Just because, I mean, think about the people who just lost their job this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, that's horrible. I look at all the soccer players, especially the Canadian players, that lost their jobs this weekend. I mean, this is a horrible news. I'm not saying, I want the Fury to fold if they can't join the CPL. That's not what I'm saying at all. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible piece of news for Canadian soccer, because now you lose 23 player spots for Canadian players that play professionally in Canada. You lose coaching opportunities, management opportunities, and the list goes on. So, I mean, there's a lot of jobs that we unfortunately lost on Friday because of this decision. And again, I just feel like the whole politics of it all was the reason behind us losing the Ottawa Fury.
Yeah, it's hard to overlook the fact that there was absolutely bad blood in the relationships between the Fury, CONCACAF, Canadian Soccer Association. There there was clearly some poor relationships there. Whether it was a cause or the cause, who really knows? But I think the takeaway for me for all this is that this kind of gives me pause because, like you said, this is a pro soccer team in Canada with some history, with a strong fan base. I know a couple huge Ottawa Fury fans. Um, and yeah, like you said, these are players, coaches, physio. Like a lot of people losing work here. This is like you said,
Yeah.
this is a sad story, especially when that opportunity existed, or certainly from the outside looking in, it looks like there was this opportunity that existed, both in terms of David Klanikin kind of promoting the idea and continuing to, at least publicly, extend the olive branch. Like you said, Kurt Larson saying there wasn't even going to be an expansion fee. I know in the initial run up to this inaugural season, the deal was going to be that salary caps and those kinds of rules were going to be relaxed for Ottawa to facilitate that transition. Man, who knows? Who knows? It's something doesn't quite smell right with it though.
Yeah, no, and like you said, that they would have had the relaxed salary cap. They could have came in with the exact same roster they had this year to play in the CPL, which was probably a bigger salary cap hit than any of the CPL teams. They would have had so many advantages. It just blows my mind. I mean, ultimately, they didn't want to jump ship to a new league that possibly would fold, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, they end up folding anyway a year later. It's
Right.
just like you said. I think there's a lot more going on behind closed doors that we don't know about one day, and hopefully one day we do know about. Maybe it comes out in book form, audio form, podcast form. But I mean, I just feel like there's a lot going on here. I think
Yeah.
there's really only a fraction of it that we know that's in the public. But it's a real, honest to truth, sad day. I mean, it really is to lose the Ottawa Fury, to lose all those professional players. I think it was 2018 that they ended up fielding the most playing time for any Canadian amount of any playing time. I think it was for total Canadians per minute for any professional club in the world. So they
Yep.
played more Canadians per minute in the world. I think it was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, than any other
Yeah, I
team.
think you're right. And that's something to be proud of for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I mean that's a huge loss. That's a huge amount of minutes. That's a huge lot of players. But at the other end of the way, I mean, obviously it's a negative, but you gotta look at the positives here. Do you think that this makes it a little bit easier for the CPL now to maybe come into the Ottawa area now that there is no team that's kind of holding them back?
Yeah, it's possible, and I know this is something that David Klanikin has been quoted as saying in the past is with the Fury or without, the Canadian Premier League belongs in Ottawa in one form or another. What this does now is it means if the league were to expand into Ottawa, it would not then be competing for season ticket holders. It wouldn't be competing for fans or airtime. So in that regard, it's good. It's absolutely not as good as having had the Fury join the league. That would have been, whenever a club gets a running start because it's got that history, it has a fan base. The supporters groups already know all the songs. You know what I mean? Like there's a history there. But no, I think if you are to kind of ask yourself, what's the opportunity in this ugly situation? Then maybe that's it. And I think the other thing is that I'm really glad that if the Fury folding was kind of this inevitable thing to have happen, I'm really glad that there are seven other Div 1 teams that these Canadians who've now lost work could go try their hand at. You don't necessarily have to fly the coop and go to the States or go to Europe. You can still play at home, which is like I said, if there's any good news story out of this, that would be it.
Yeah, no, and that's another thing I was thinking of is that there's going to be openings this coming season. We're going to talk about a little bit later in the show, but there's already a couple openings in Edmonton. There's already a couple openings in Halifax. There's bound to be a multiple more players that unfortunately will get released from these other 5 clubs in the CPL. So I mean, it opens up spots, and there are quality talent, especially quality Canadian talent on the Ottawa Fury that I think could transition over perfectly into the CPL and almost help advance the CPL into a positive direction in terms of raising that talent level and a bunch of that stuff. But I think overall, I almost feel like as bad as the Ottawa situation is, it sucks that we lost the team. It almost kind of lifts that kind of weight on the CPL, just CPL specifically here, because now they just are almost free to just move in. Like you said, they're not competing now with another professional soccer club in that area. They're not competing for season ticket holders, for fans' interest. They're going to be the only one if they move in there. And I really believe now that this opens up wide Ottawa in terms of expansion talk. I think at this point, you just got to find a really good ownership group there. I almost kind of feel like the CPL sort of has one in mind there. But now that this whole news went down, I feel like this kind of speeds up Ottawa's timeline. I'm going to say right now, I think in 3 years, by 2022, we're going to have either an announcement or a team in Ottawa playing professionally in the CPL.
Yeah. Oh no, it has to be a market that the league is looking at as kind of a primary one. They've demonstrated that pro soccer is something of interest. They have season ticket holders. They've done it. Yeah, I think you're onto something there for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think, and it's crazy too. There's a stadium that's ready to go there. There's training facilities there. It's world-class city. I mean, everything is ready to move into. You don't have to really build anything. You just move in. So
Yeah.
I think that's a plus there for sure.